Now joined by the magnificently named Darwin Friend, Head of Research at the Taxpayers Alliance, to go through this. Darwin, welcome to the studio. Can you explain to me, he hasn't found a massive bag of cash, has he? It's the government hasn't borrowed quite as much as it thought it had, therefore it has spare money that it can dish out as tax cuts. Is that right?
Yeah, well, first of all, Martin, thanks very much for having me on the show this afternoon. And you're absolutely right. It's not, for example, like he's found a bag of cash at the back of the sofa. What's happened is tax revenues have been higher than forecast and spending has been lower than they forecasted. I mean, it's important to say borrowing was still just under 100 billion rather than just over the 100 billion that they predicted. And so what we're actually seeing is, as you say, he hasn't got a whole new bag full of cash. What he's got is he's borrowed less. But what he should be doing with that money, seeing as they had forecasted it in, is he should be using that for a tax cut, because he's got £9 billion under the amount they were forecasting to spend. That's more than enough for a cut in income tax.
Now, so in simple terms, this is a bit like saying my credit card limit isn't quite maxed out, so I can spend a bit more. £9 billion more. What kind of tax cuts do you think that should be going towards, Darwin? Because surely now, as we approach this general election, it's tax cuts or die for the Tories.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I work for the Taxpayers Alliance, so of course I'm going to be calling for tax cuts right now, and that's because hard-pressed Brits really need them. Your listeners and taxpayers across the country are still really suffering with the cost of living right now. And with that £9 billion, as I say, that's more than enough to take a penny off income tax, for example, which is something that I would really support, or it could go some way to starting to unfreeze those tax thresholds, which are dragging potentially 2.5 million people this year, since the freeze was enacted, into income tax. And so I think what he needs to be doing is really taking a cut into income tax into mind as he approaches the budget in a couple of weeks' time.
And that's the dreaded fiscal drag. So as wages go up and inflation goes up, but the tax thresholds don't, you just naturally find yourself into a higher tax band than you previously were, which means you pay more tax, which might explain why Jeremy Hunt's got so much longer.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, alongside the £9 billion in borrowing that he didn't do, today's figures actually showed a £16.7 billion surplus that the Treasury has as a result of the latest statistics. And that's because tax revenues have come in from people that are self-employed. Self-assessed taxes have come in, which means they've got a big bag of money that they don't normally have throughout the rest of the year. But what I would be saying ultimately to the Chancellor right now is tax policy should never be done based on the electoral map that's coming up. But we did some research at the Taxpayers Alliance that showed that governments that increase the tax burden before elections end up, on average, losing those elections, and those that cut them actually go on to win those elections. So I really think he should take that into mind when the budget comes up.
Do you think a penny in the pound will be enough, sexy enough, to win an election? It doesn't set the soul on fire 1p, does it?
Well, I think we've got an income tax campaign at the Taxpayers Alliance, and we're saying let's go 2p, just like the last Labour government did before that election. Let's do 2p income tax cut now, so that then people really feel that extra money in their pocket, and that will really help them with the everyday staples. They're not going out and spending it on expensive things. They're trying to spend it on their weekly shop, their energy bills, their mortgages, which have all gone up recently, and they really need that money right now to help them out.
Yeah, bang on. Thank you very much, Darwin Friend. I think a lot of people out there will be saying, hurrah, at long last, we need some relief from the cost of living crisis. Thank you very much, Darwin Friend from the Taxpayers Alliance.